Hello there, Sarah from 17 once again. This is my Rise of the Tomb Raider Survivor difficulty video walkthrough. This is the flooded archives. We're going to get there by going through this cathedral. Always make sure to investigate your surroundings. That way you can get goodies, trinkets, ammo, loot, that kind of thing, and then progress onwards to the next zone. So the sequence coming up is quite puzzle heavy. It's also going to introduce the supernatural angle to the storyline. You knew it was coming, you've been reading about it forever. A deathless army that supported the Prophet and what have you. And we're going to be bumping into them. And if I had to lever a criticism towards the game, it would definitely be that in its similarities with the first game, this feels very similar to the samurai enemy in the first Tomb Raider. And this brings us to the Uncharted discussion of every game has to have this supernatural edge gimmick. Whereas in the first Uncharted it was the Golem guys, the second Uncharted it was the blue dudes who'd eaten the resin, and then in the third game it was the hallucination of those fire fellas. After some cutscenes you're going to have to shoot these power boxes, these batteries. They're going to blow up spectacularly and drop us into this hole, and then we're going to be moving towards the flooded archive. A tenet that's useful for video games is whenever a game starts you facing forward, immediately turn around to see if there's anything good behind you. If there's nothing, you've lost nothing. If there's something good, you found it without realising what it was. It's a really, really good piece of habit to get into, because a lot of the times game developers like to put things in very particular places, and if you can get used to the paradigms of this, you'll become a better player and a more aware player of games. But as we were saying, the supernatural element in these games seems to be quite the linchpin in them. They all seem to be founded on it, and it brings an interesting question as I upgrade the Death Cloud there. Is it necessity to have these things, you know? Are they necessary? Do they give it enough differentiation from what you've been doing? And in the case of this game, when I first fought against the Deathless, it was interesting because they were tough, and I didn't understand how they worked. So when I first attacked them, I shot one in the face with my gun. It didn't kill him. I was like, Jesus. You know, I shot him with my shotgun. It didn't stun him. And then I was like, oh, the only way you can kill this enemy is if I blow up these pots of magic fire, this Greek fire that's laid everywhere. And that seemed to work really good, but all my guns didn't. So I'm like, well, I can't hurt these with my guns. These are a tough enemy. This is cool. Maybe they'll have this element of these new guys and soldiers fighting at the same time, and you can have two factions warring against you. That could be cool. Everybody for themselves. Never happens, by the way. But that's not how they work at all. I just didn't understand them at the point. So gameplay-wise, all they do is they add a different faction to shoot. So visually you're shooting something different. And then gameplay-wise, they move a little bit quicker than your standard soldiers, they're a little bit more aggressive, and they come in like three varieties. One of them is a heavier guy who either has a shield or a big axe. One of them is the dude with the sword who's quite aggressive and fast attacking. And then another one is the archer, who is easily the most dangerous because he's a dickhead who likes to keep distance and cheese you with arrows, and then when you put anything between you and him, he rushes you. So he is an example of a dangerous enemy when put with other enemies could be incredibly interesting. But as it stands, he's put with the rest of his normal guys and never in the numbers that would really dictate failure unless you do something wrong or you get yourself in a bad spot. There's a particularly interesting fight coming up now, but it's glitchy, so be careful. So once you touch this item, it's going to give you a checkpoint and it's going to start this assault. There's going to be people on the balcony and people dropping down. What you want to do is you want to kill the first guy dropping down, and then you want to kill the guy on the balcony. If you do it correctly, he will not throw the grenades at you, and he'll not force you out of your cover. And then from there on, you can attack the rest of them and kill them whichever way you want to. If done correctly, they'll start attacking the door, alien style, and it'll fall down, and you can get a nice spawn poison arrow on everybody who comes through the door. If you do it incorrectly, or the game just fucks up like it did for me, nobody will ever come through the door and you'll be in this room forever. So you'll notice one arrow is killing those people falling down. If the door doesn't fuse like it's doing now with the sparks, it means the scripting is balls. But aim your bow at the bottom of the door, and as soon as it detonates, fire, and you will kill everybody rushing in. That, my friend, is where the poison arrows are king. That kind of scenario, easy, quick, efficient, lethal. How cool was that? That is a great strategy for that room, and that's when the combat really shines. Unfortunately, there is so few skirmishes in this game that you only do this once or twice per level, and it culminates a lot of the combat, so you never really feel like you're fighting. And if that's a good thing to you, then you're going to really enjoy this game. If it's not so good, you might not like it as much. But here's another spawn arrow. Get rid of a ton of people abseiling in. And then there's a couple more just on that corner. And then you'll notice there's another door that's been pushed through. So the moment the door gets pushed through, you want to greet them with another spawn arrow. If done correctly, you can get them all. I missed one of them, I think. Yeah, you can see his laser. So I have to waste an extra arrow. That was bullshit because it hit the fucking statue's invisible skirt. So I'm using normal arrows here because I don't want to waste one on this guy, but it's not working as good. I could have used an explosive or a flame arrow like that. That hit invisible clipping, that hit him. That's the end of the fight. If you get better shots off on your poison arrows, you should be able to mitigate that entire skirmish at the end and have maximum results. But that is rooms you can control really effectively by using your tools. And if you look, I've got a bunch of mushrooms. I can remake all those arrows I just used, and we're now ready to deliver poisonous goodness to anybody else who wants to claim it. And that's where this game is probably at its most taxing on inventory, of making sure that you've always got the resources to remedy what you use. And to be honest, guys, I've never really had to pace myself. I've never really had to abstain from using them. The only time in this game where I don't use the poison arrows when I could is at a firefight against the Deathless right before the final boss, because I think it's a really fun, tense standoff against a ton of dudes from all directions, and I wanted to try and do it with the shotgun, because at that point I'd pretty much acknowledged I'd done all the tough bits, so I thought I'd get a bit creative with it, and I found a really crazy strategy that involves rushing the guy who's shooting arrows at you and staying on the balcony a little bit. And of course, you don't have to do it that way, which is the great thing about all games. You can implement your own strategies, and you can use those arrows, should you want to. Incredibly powerful, get the job done. I just wanted to do something a little different. So right now, once you swim under, you're not going to be able to come up for air for a while, so you want to get ready to tap the B button quite feverishly to push yourself through. And you'll notice I was really casual then, just, I might drown, who knows. And this is an interesting mechanic because, of course, the fire is consuming the oxygen on the surface of the water, and it's stopping me from going up for air. So after those cutscenes, it's going to put you here. You now have the rebreather, which means all those tombs you couldn't previously access, you now can, which is a godsend because there's some good stuff in them and they're pretty fun. But I was really surprised in this game that there wasn't more underwater stuff to it, because in the old Tomb Raiders there was quite a lot of water from the sections that I played, and I never really liked the water sections in those games because they used to scare me, because I used to think there was going to be crocodiles in them, and sometimes there was. But in a game such as this, they didn't really program it so you have the best control over Lara in the water, so it's not like you can kind of go your own path and dive the way you want. It's kind of a very set limit, which is perfectly fine considering you don't do much swimming, and when you do, there's no real nuance to it. But I don't know if I'm alone in this. I really thought that there would be more swimming, more underwater interaction, underwater puzzle solving, that kind of stuff, because that seems to be the kind of thing that crops up in what I would assume in a Tomb Raider. Which is to say, I played the first two Tomb Raiders, and that's about it. And when I say played them, I did like the first few levels. I never got very far because I was never very good at them. Like, I remember playing one where you fought a dinosaur, which was pretty scary, and I remember a tiger, I think. And there was one where there was a shark in the water. I remember that one. I think it was maybe Tomb Raider 2, maybe Tomb Raider 3. I played a few of the earlier ones, but you know, they weren't really games that... I never owned them to begin with. I played them at a friend's house, because I never owned a PlayStation 1, believe it or not. I was an N64 guy. But a lot of my friends had PlayStations, so I borrowed them off them, and that's where I experienced a lot of games. But at that point, I was already into like your JRPGs and stuff, so I didn't really want to come back to awkwardly controlling Tomb Raider games. And then they kind of got modernized, didn't they, where they they ran them into the ground a little bit by just like, you know, Tomb Raider in Venice, Tomb Raider in Jungle, Tomb Raider in Volcano. And once they'd finished running through all that and pumping one out every year, it became the question of reboots and remakes, and, you know, machines got more powerful. And then you had those ones where it was like, now it's just called Tomb Raider. Now it's called Tomb Raider Underworld. Now it's called Tomb Raider bloody Retribution or whatever. And there was a couple of ones for 360 and PS3, and they tried to bring it back and lower the size of Lara's tits and, you know, kind of not really do anything too new, but never liked those games. Played the demo for one of them, I think it was Tomb Raider Underworld. Just didn't like it. Didn't didn't control good to me at all, so I never played it. And then of course they did this series where they remade it for this. Thought it looked cool, picked it up. Pleasantly surprised with the game, really liked it. And then this one came out and it's a fun game too. Has to be said though, guys, and I haven't mentioned this as I do the first part of a 2-part puzzle, I don't think this game's going to do very well in the grand scheme of things, because I think the way that it was released killed it. I think it killed a lot of its aspirations to do well. When you release a game the same day as Fallout 4, you are going to lose. And do you know why? Fallout 4 had over 100,000 people playing it on launch on Twitch alone. Twitch alone. Massive numbers, incredible numbers. Tomb Raider didn't. And you released it the same day, and the devs were arrogant enough, or the publisher, I don't know which one it was, I hope it wasn't the devs, and I hope the devs, if they are the people being like, we're going to fucking fail here, we should never do this, yet the publisher's like, we're doing this, you know, we gave the money, we release it, dickheads. I hope it's that, I truly do, because it's suicide, dude. It's just suicide, straight up suicide, and it's a fun game, and it is a different kind of game, but nobody's going to care when there's Fallout out. Because it's so much bigger and it took so much more attention away from it. And like, you can go on trueachievements.com, which is a website for those people that like to track statistics and do achievements and compete with people and what have you. And on there, Fallout has a ridiculous number of tracked gamers who've played Fallout 4. It's like 78,000 on that website. Tomb Raider doesn't have 1/3 of that, I don't think. And that's just the people that have qualified for the achievements. So those are the people who are playing games perhaps they don't want to play just for achievements. And not even they showed up. So I think they did it a massive disservice, and it's sad because, don't get me wrong, in the grand scheme of games, if it was between this and the Wonderful 101, I would sink this like the fucking galleon full of lead. Wouldn't bother me at all, because this is a sequel. This is a game that's took very little risks to reinforce on elements that were already very good, and it's just doing it in a more prettier shell. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want that, you're going to get a great experience here. But when it comes to a new IP that's taking all the risks, creating all these crazy new things, I'm going for Wonderful 101 every time. And that's a game that suffered just because it is what it is. Welcome to a lack of innovation and a lack of creativity and a lack of, you know, games that aren't annualized franchises being marketed up the arse doing well. And then you have games that push boundaries and do things just for the joy of doing it and really kindle into that part of your childhood that remembers when you played games for fun rather than all the other bullshit, and then nobody fucking buys them. But back on Tomb Raider, it's just, if this game suffers in the long run because of like the Microsoft exclusivity, which cuts off, you know, 2/3 of the market because they have to wait for the PC version, they have to wait for the PlayStation 4 version, then it's going to suck on that grounds. And then of course, additionally on top of that, you have the fact that they released it at a terrible time. It should have either been released earlier, or it should have been released later. You know, December was a dead month, they could have released it in December and got better traction. But no, they decide to run alongside Fallout. Could have done it in January. What's in January? Resident Evil 0, that's it. Like, only DSP's covering one fucking game this month, and that's the dude who covers everything. Nothing in January. It would have done so much better for itself. But they wanted it out sooner, and I don't know, maybe it was a clause in that you get it a year, but you have to release it in November. You know, in the exclusivity that they paid for. I'm not quite sure, but what I do know is it literally cut off its feet to spite its legs, and they lost a lot of potential growth with this franchise. And the thing that will suck the most is they leave this game on a bit of a cliffhanger setting up the next game, but depending on the sales of this game will depend on whether or not there even is a next game. You know, critically, it did well. Commercially, the numbers I've not looked at them since I first checked them, but they weren't great. And I'm hoping that, you know, maybe it has a resurgence at some point, just for people to check it out and see if they like it. You never know, you might not like it. That's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes one game is great, but more of that game is not enough. That's kind of how I felt about Assassin's Creed for a very long time. And then they mixed it up enough to be like, yeah, this is worth checking out. It's how I now feel about things like Call of Duty. It's how I feel about a lot of games. I feel that way about God of War. Because those games are always too similar. You know, they never mix it up. They haven't mixed that game up since the second one. And I just, to me, I can't keep playing the same thing. It just doesn't do it for me anymore. But up you get. Here's the top part. A bit more crazy wild platforming as we push forward towards the end of this. You're not in any real danger from the ambient archers, but if you stop, you might get hurt. Like just then, I got injured by the... That's a scary moment when you think you fucked up or you think that the game's dropped your grab. But it's designed. And Lara's okay. And there's always water to cushion her falls or something along that nature. And that light, it's really strange. When you walk into a dark area, it's dark until she cracks that crazy disco light, that strobe tube. And sometimes it takes her a while to do it because it's an animation, and if you're doing other animations, it doesn't prioritize it. So there are times when it takes her a while to do it, and there are times where you can skip the animation by rolling, and it just goes from being dark to light, and she hasn't even cracked it, which is quite funny. But it's an interesting choice. I wish you could enable it and disable it, because there are times when I think it makes the lighting look really good, and there are times when it makes it look kind of weird. Like, it looked quite weird then. On her ass it looked great, but on the surrounding halo, like that circle of light, it didn't look quite as nice. Besides, in areas such as this, you'd think that they allow the game to do its own ambient lighting, because it's got a lot of really well-designed lighting. As we do a little bit more swimming here with the rebreather. But you see what I mean? I don't have any real depth control here. I can't, to my knowledge, make her go any deeper than when she's swimming there. You know, you can't hold up on the analog or hold down to have any real effect on her momentum. It's quite strange to me. You know, swimming mechanics have had several different faces. They are a veritable hydra of different mechanics, yet this one is so simplified. You literally... It's used as like a loading corridor between areas, even though I don't think it's probably loading anything. It's not like those horrendous parts of Tony Hawk, was it Wasteland? Where you would ride through those crappy grey tunnels to get to the next place and it was doing it to load it without telling you. Those were crazy, them. I love the idea, I hate the implementation. But we're listening to... Danik, one second here. What is this guy's name? I called him Jacob, I think, in the first video, but he just said thanks Jacob, which means Jacob is the prophet, which means my first video is wrong. What is the like, Samoan black man called? Damn it. Can't remember his name. He's pointless, though, as a character. I was wishing he would die. I really was, and it sounds awful, doesn't it? It doesn't sound very nice. But this is a dude who shows up for the sole purpose of having Lara save his ass. He's so shit. And don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against women saving men. I'm not a sexist like that. But this dude is shit. He helps nothing and hinders everything and just puts more strain on our poor heroine. What a dick.